There's a group that both Hannah and I know down in Tennessee called Sundress Academy for the Arts, and their publications, and we've got a press there. And I've done workshops for them and done readings down there and things like that. And one of the times I was down there, I met a young poet named Andrew Koch, who was real bright-eyed and real excited. He was about to finish Tennessee and go to an MFA program. And he was talking about coming to OSU. And he was asking me a lot of questions about Columbus and things like that. Ultimately, he ended up deciding to go, he got a full fellowship out in Seattle, I think. But he really pumped me for information about Columbus. And he had a little ego on him, as I do as well, and we were sort of butting heads a little bit. So this is the younger poet asks questions of Ohio for Andrew. Already posing, unbloodied, I was asked by talent what it was like to live in Ohio. I was asked by the next champion if the food was any good, what the weather was like, could he get tickets to a hockey game, were there enough sheltering hands to carry him, his love, their pale stones. He's a good kid. I've looked him up. He is the next champion here, but I get to work him over a bit before he comes to the bottom of my ravine to take this homemade belt. I really like this kid. He's got good, active blood, which should keep him warm during the hard times to come. You got a kick out of that. I was a visiting writer at University of Wisconsin-Superior for a weekend and got to have a lot of fun up there. And while I was there, Lake Superior was frozen, but not frozen to the point where anybody was willing to walk across it, which happens sometimes. Like it gets frozen up, people will walk to islands and things like that. So really bad weather, really cold, and my friend kept showing me the lake and daring me to walk a little bit, and I was never, ever brave enough to do that. So this poem's about that little trip. The ice will keep our tide at the ready. A monument to the possibility that a 7-year soup may be required to feel the heat of good action again, I've decided to perch myself next to Lake Superior, to cancel flights, slash tires, give the wind a good shot at me from all angles. I see how often the water wants to rise. I see how so many people can balk at walking across this division of animal and the animal of the water's assault. Numb with beauty, eventually, I expect to be numb by caution, but if we decided to release 2 million balloons from the shoreline, they would be in Canada before they ever understood the fear that was driving them north. There, a roll of the lake's shoulders, a heave of spirit, a sneaky lick of the large black rocks. On second thought, maybe I will just take a picture and witness this sequence from Duluth, where the dominoes of the season will only slightly rattle my belief that all of the ice will someday find me in Ohio, will deliver a message that I really never understood what it was the particulars of this ghost spring can really do. The jewel never chooses the setting. The energy is mostly spent building answers to what might happen next, and from almost every angle, this great heaving body feels like a beautiful threat. In both, as we refer to our bodies, and the next book, there are these Emily As poems. They're sort of love poems that have a bit of a formula to them, and trying to create a different kind of tether and tension with what love poems can do. And so I think over the last 7 or 8 years, I've probably written about 900 or 1,000 of these. And they've been well received, about 300 or 400 have been published, and it's gone well. I'm sort of petering off, and I may or may not be done right, just because I think I've written sort of every angle about it. And I'll read 3 of these, and then I'll be done. And the last one sort of is talking about being done writing them. Emily, as the campfire gathers the branch. Swimming deeper into the night, the softness left the scene where we were able to form a name for the fire, when we were able to dip the flowers from the garden into the fire without cause or care. We knew that all we had done was create hunger and give hunger a name we could say with smoke in our eyes. Turning away, cowardly, I dragged my hand across my face to wipe the chase of the tendrils to my sweater. Emily added more wood to the flame. She changed the shape of the mouth in the pit, flushed the sparks towards the cuff of our pants. She loves doing that shit. I was lucky enough that this one was in the last release from Colorado Review. Emily is luminance deflected. The first letter that Magnificent wrote was in deference to the Lord. The second letter that Magnificent wrote was about a tide of angels overwhelming the shores, confronting the sun. The third letter was a confession that Magnificence believed only in the heat of other magnificence, and the army of heavens, general and company, seemed to only carry individuals on the sand, one at a time, driving them mad with the thought that they might not be alone. The fourth letter Magnificence wrote was more of a song that buried the proof inside of her glorious, malleable intention to be weak beauty, but be beauty all the same. When I went down to Knoxville I taught a workshop on love poetry, and essentially it was called how to write a love poem that doesn't suck. It was essentially how they phrased it. And we had a lot of conversations about what I was doing with the Emily poems and different things, and it sort of struck up a dialogue between myself and several of the ladies that work at Sunrise. It's mostly a female-driven group. And I said I was sort of feeling guilty a little bit about writing all these Emily poems, and it didn't quite seem fair to her. Was it becoming me more using her for something as opposed to celebrating and things like that? And sort of murky waters from a feminist perspective, my perspective as well, about whether or not I was sort of doing this unfairly. And then what happened was we had a couple readings that Emily came to. There's a real Emily. And she got real excited about the poems being read and answering questions about them. Like, she was really into it now. She'd always sort of, oh, Darren, It didn't matter that they were in the book or published all the time. She just didn't pay that much attention to it. And then she was kind of really excited that she was getting attention as well because of it. And so I was taken aback by that. I kept waiting for her to kind of get upset and sort of be like, well, why'd you put that little story in there? Why did, Anyway, so I wrote this poem and sent it to the ladies at Sundress and sort of said, I might be done. This might have sort of capped things off. And they were impressed with it. So of all the poems that's going to be in the third book when it comes out, this is the only one that's hasn't been placed somewhere, and I'm just putting it in the book. We'll end it with this one. Emily as she loses focus in a poem. Unwilling to be a statue and painted only in the slants of shadows, Emily has started to answer questions at readings about these poems, about herself in these poems. She has heard me talk about them for years, and I couldn't be more disappointed that she is cribbing my answers. I wrote these for a decade, waiting for her to get pissed, to take ownership of them, to ask why I told the truth and why I lied, and just kept going without asking her. She likes it now, when she's naked and a little bit mean in the poems, and she likes people thinking that that part of her is real. I suppose I've gotten away with it. Thank you.